The war in Ukraine has changed the world. And now we need to think about where this world is moving to, together. That's why MIM Business School is launching the nationwide educational project ReinforceUA, where the world's greatest minds will share their ideas and insights. And you will get their experience, change your perspective, and discover what changes should the business be ready for, before and after the victory. Every week on ReinforceUA.com.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, friends, colleagues in Ukraine and worldwide. We are on ReinforceUA project, which runs every Wednesday on 6 p.m. in Kyiv time. Welcome back. This project was designed to inspire Ukrainian business community and to bring eminent speakers to share their views on where the world is moving to and what kind of problems, what kind of issues are at the moment in the agenda of people and mankind. This project became possible due to the support of Bogdan Gavrilishin Foundations and 50 Thinkers organization and 3 main business school associations worldwide: AACSB, AMBA, and EVMD. On behalf of MIM Business School, I appreciate and thanks for all donations you have made when registering the email, and remind that all money collected will be directed to support of temporarily these moved women who are going to start their own business. The project is recorded, the lecture will be recorded, and you will be able to see it later on our website. I also remind you that we're online. We have the possibility to ask questions, and for this purpose, I kindly ask you to use Q&A button rather than chat. And now I'm very glad to introduce you our eminent speaker today, Anders Indset. Anders has a background as an entrepreneur and worked for a dedicated consultant for various companies. He holds various roles in the advisory board of different companies and visiting guest lecturer at leading international business school. His first book, Quantenschaft, and there are some other words in this. I will not try my German to pronounce correctly. Became the Spiegel bestseller 2 years ago. Was translated in several languages, and as far as I could gather, Anders had to be in Ukraine in April this year for presentation of this book, and has therefore his own personal reasons to blame Russians and Mr. Putin for the war that is going on. So thank you very much, Anders, for being able to join us today, and I give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Slava. It's a pleasure to be with you. And I do have a personal experience in a relationship to Ukraine. Just last weekend, we were talking about some of the families with my neighbors, and we were watching Usyk fight the boxing match. And I was standing outside screaming Slava Ukraine. And and we're playing the piano, playing Dome from the great Artem Pivovarov. So I have felt this passion, and I want to talk about, and I like the intro before and after the victory, and the reinforcement of this great country and this great economy in a context of how I see the world and how I saw the world prior to this outbreak of this horrible war. Because for about 50 years or so, humanity was stuck in a small fatal nap. Going back to 1970, at least from a Western perspective, we've been trying to optimize the art of being right. It was all about optimizing through technology and making progress. So we landed on a digital and technological future where now everything is boiled down to your opinion and my opinion, zeros and one. And there is no possibility for that dance of coming to a common ground to stand on. And as we all know, the only thing that humanity has is progress. And regardless of the situation that we are in, it's all about positive progress. But progress is not a law of nature, but it's possible if we commit ourselves to work and be human beings and do the fantastic things that we can do to create new technologies and innovation and strive for prosperity for posterity, for a future that looks brighter for more people and for many in comparison to where we are today. And of course, this is all about business. It's about economy. Everything has become a part of the economy. Everything has a value and a price, and we all see the relationship and the interdependency of the world that we have created. When we go back to May, people gathered in Davos for the World Economic Forum. But the absurdity of how the world has changed was shown there because this year shamans came and presented psychedelics and fungi, and there were a lot of blockchain and crypto projects and NFTs, the new arts and tweets that were printed out and scanned and sold for millions, and all of a sudden they were not worth a lot of money. And all of this shows the complexity and the absurdity of the world that we have created. Just a couple of weeks ago, I went to do my favorite thing, to go to one of those German villages where you can have all these shopping centers. And I was standing there with all the crazy people standing in line, and my back was hurting and everything. And all of a sudden, my daughter said, "Daddy, it's Lululemon." And I said, "What? Lulu what?" I had never heard about this Lululemon. And Lululemon, it turns out, is a global brand. It's a brand that sells yoga wear. So they sell yoga raincoats for $300. So when we in Germany now go to the office in the morning, we take our regular raincoat, and the evening when we go to do yoga, we put on our yoga raincoat. Even a part of capitalism has become the ancient philosophy of yoga. That was certainly not the thoughts of the yogis back 3,000 years ago, how we could capitalize on this. So from a Western standpoint, what we came up with was some kind of atheist, believing, pop, Western, Buddhist capitalism, where everything was about prosperity and luxury, and we wanted to have the balance and the self-care. And all of a sudden, with the first peak shaking us awake was the pandemic, of course. The wicked witch Corona told us that, well, you can look up now. There is something called a sunset, and you now have time. We have this terrible virus, so now spend time alone and do cooking classes and read some books and do podcasts. And then came the second and third lockdown, and people became tired. They were worn out, and we stopped activating ourselves. And then this terrible war broke out, and we took down the supply chains, and we see the consequences. And now people are talking about crisis. And I just came back from a session last night talking to German companies about their crisis in export. And everyone was positive, but everyone is talking about crisis. And I think this is the notion, is that today we need to have a high tolerance for ambiguities. We need to tackle paradoxes, and we need to get more understanding of everything we know, sort out the known, the art of being right. But there is one more art that got lost back in 1970, and that was the art of being wrong. The actual experience of learning, the feeling of that someone can have a better idea than we have, and the openness to negotiate and talk about various viewpoints of life. In Germany, we have Ludwig Erhard, who was one of the fathers of the social economic journey and the prosperity for Germany, where he proposed the value of prosperity for all back in the 60s. And the journey that we went through kind of sort of shows that it was a good journey, because around the world, we started to live longer. Less people were in war. Less people were starving from poverty. So we had decades of progress. But with that, we forgot about the planet, and we forgot about educating the mensch about the foundations of what it means to be a mensch, a human being. And that caused conflicts, that caused the problems and the issues, and that caused the complexity of all the crises that are now hitting us. So now it's time to rediscover the art of being wrong. And where better to start with that than with the companies that are related to Kyiv, to Ukraine, with the people that are now interested in a reinforcing and reigniting an economy, with the power and the belief in a better future. Because with the crisis, with the negativity, with wearing us down comes exactly the opposite. We stop acting. And the issue around the world today is not that we lack financial opportunities or technologies. The issue is not that the people that have the capabilities to act do not do enough. And the spirit of Ukraine, what is going through the world today, can be a birthplace of reigniting and reinforcing a global economy where we understand that everything is related to each other. Everything is interdependent. We cannot build wars and we cannot divide because there is one planet. The whole screaming about the ecological collapse and the crisis go all the way back to 1970. 20 million people took to the streets in the US to fight the climate crisis. But do we really act? Do the Western decadent and welfare states do enough? No. Even my home country, Norway, an oil country, who has all the technology, they have all the financial opportunities to invest in those new technologies that are obvious going to be profitable in 10, 20, 30 years. But they only act when this terrible war breaks out. The future generations need to be killed in television for the leaders of the countries in Norway and Germany to really act. So it's time to show that the belief in technology and the belief in economic prosperity comes from acting and putting the mensch, the human being, with the creation and the innovation in the middle. If we only focus on what we know and try to optimize, we will not get anywhere, because the challenge is not knowledge. The challenge is understanding. If we would have a society of understanding in Russia, people would ask themselves, is this plausible? Can I believe this information? There is nothing we can really know at the bottom of knowledge. But when we have the knowledge, we can take and play with it, and we can try to get to an understanding. Everything we think about in the past was of a finite way of thinking. It was the winners and the losers. But the economy and the world is not like that. It's infinite. It is about short-term and long-term. It is about local and global. It is about infinity. It is about prosperity for posterity. And we cannot do that by only trying to optimize what we have created in the past, our self-evident truth. When we talk about politics and democracies today, it's very much different than it was 50 years ago. When we talk about the economy, it's very much different than it used to be. We talk about education. My daughter goes to school in Germany and she gets an Abschluss, which means the closes her education out. And she gets a grade how good she is at saving information for 1 hour for one test. She just has to save the information for 1 hour. We are trying to mimic the cell phone to save data. That's not what we are good at. The foundation of this business school and the foundation of the reignition and the reinforcement of the Ukraine economy must be built on learning, the capacity and the capabilities to learn, the understanding that education is learning how to learn. And when we learn how to learn, then we become teachers. Because if we try to teach people something fundamental and not just do it on the top and throw out information, then we have to have a deeper understanding of what we really do mean. And this is the foundation of building a stronger economy. Economy that's don't solve problems, but they create better problems. A vaccine doesn't solve the problem of a virus, it just makes it better. That's positive progress. And that's the essence, the heart, the art of doing business is creating better problems. What is the problem that your business wants to solve? How do you make positive progress within that story, within that narrative? That's what business should be about, not about transactions and compound rates and trying to, squeeze out something out of someone. It should be about positive progress for the people. Because that was the issue back in the 1970s. We forgot about the stakeholders. We forgot about the planet. We forgot about the human being. And that's what we are tired today. Now the business should be about all stakeholders, serving the local communities, connecting to the global world, and aiming for positive progress and better problems. And the answer to all of this is, of course, technology. Technology is the answer to everything, said Rick Prince. But what was the question? The same thing applies for technology. If we are just throwing out buzzwords like sustainability and don't think about what it really means, or we talk about technology such as artificial intelligence, and we don't have an understanding of what we want to do with it, then we have a problem, because then it's just words. And words, as we know, don't lead to action. There has to be something intrinsic, something that triggers us. And it cannot be the crisis. We cannot react to crisis. We have to believe in a better future. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, well, except from the fact that AI is like my initials, so I like it, AI, artificial intelligence, it sounds cool. It is just a word that we came up with in the 50s because cybernetics from Norbert Wiener did not sound cool enough. Because first of all, it's not artificial, because it's been created by human beings. And secondly, what is intelligence? What is it that sparks the magic of a thought? We have no idea. The wonderful philosophical question of creation will always remain unanswered. And that's a job guarantee for all scientists, for all physicists and all neuroscientists trying to figure out the brain. We are working on the neurons, our brain, everything that has fired. The only thing we have, we can think about our thoughts, but the actual intelligence, the creation, the emergent phenomena, we have no idea. And that is where the magic is, the beauty, the creation that we human beings can contribute to if we put in the effort and believe in the future. Because if you want to understand society, we have to rethink the economy. That has become clear. The old economy is dead. The new economy, the promise of Ferraris for yachts for everyone, can and will never happen. What follows, it was I called the quantum economy. Why the quantum economy? Well, because business is much more like quantum physics than the linear and absolute models that we have created. It's not about winning or losing. It's about playing as long as we can. Not like a soccer game where Norway play against Germany 90 minutes and Haaland scores a goal and the Norwegian win. Not like that. It's more like some come from some regions with 4 people, others with 400,000. Some think in months, some think in years. It's a different type of notion. It's dynamic and it's infinite. It's built on capitalism, but it's built on a capitalism with compassion. We need an upgrade to that capitalistic model. The foundation of the new market economy is, of course, it needs to be sustainable, ecological correctly. Of course, there needs to be a social, a human aspect to it. That's what we have to strive for, a socio-ecological economy. But that's just the basis. What we add to that is something special. Because I believe that if we look at solving the crisis by reducing and limiting ourselves and withdrawing and living a less good life and not strive for the will to truth and positive progress, we will not solve any challenges. If we take the ecological crisis still example, we will never fly less, at least not enough that it will help. So the only answer is, how do we build airplanes or objects in the air that are sustainable? We talk about reduce, and from a Western civilization, yes, we can reduce our consumption. We talk about reuse, a perfect circular economy and efficiency of resources. Yes, of course, we need to do that. But we need to have the third re, namely rethink. We need better product, better business model. We need an incentive for change. When I tell my wife, she is half Syrian, half Turkish, that she has to change, you have to limit, you have to do this, she throws me out on the street and I have to live outside for 14 days. I have to find a positive notion, an incentive for people to change behavior. And I think that is the only possibility to solve the ecological crisis. We need ships that suck out the plastic of the ocean and use that as to fuel the engine, or airplanes that suck the CO2 out of the air and transform that into some kind of energy. Those ways of thinking are the only way to progress. When in Germany and in the US and in Nordics, we talk about sustainability, it's not at all sustainable. Our ecological food and all our habits could only serve 15 to 20% of this planet. What we need to think about is to find regenerative approaches where we go into the minus, where we take technologies that we can suck out CO2, where we can clean up things, where we can go into the minus and regenerate the structures of the planet. And that is a huge business opportunity. And this is something that can be a part of the interdependent world community when, before and even during and after Ukraine wins the war and we build back and reignite. It's about rethinking. Because everyone here today are story makers. You are writing the stories of tomorrow. Future is not something that is arriving upon us. It's a verb. It is something we do. It's called to future. And everything in the economy is built on a story. When I travel to Zurich in 2 days, I land on the airport and I drink a Coke Zero because I have an agreement with the lawyers at Coke that I believe in this brown, unhealthy soup. I probably pay $30 for a bottle by now in Zurich, but it's an agreement. It's part of my understanding of business. And the same thing came clear to me how we think about business when I visited the glass towers of Frankfurt, where all the people sit and think about the economy. They asked me to talk about cryptocurrencies and blockchains and all that. And he said to me, Anders, what is this? This is not something real. This is something virtual. And I said, do you think something is real? Do you think that just because we printed some kings and queens on a piece of paper and put some ink on it, that cash is something real? Do you think that gold has a value just because it's shiny? No, it's a story. And today we are creating new stories. And that can only, I believe, come from a utopian, a positive view of the future, a trust in that we can come out of this with better technologies, that technology can serve humanity. The ecological hysteria, the crisis, don't lead to action. That's why we have to change the narrative. We have to find better ways, better problems. And that's all around the story. And you are story makers. You are writing stories every single day. You are writing your way into the history books of tomorrow. And why shouldn't that also be a part of rewriting how we do business? A belief in that a positive progress future is possible. You are leaders of change. You are leaders of change. Change is not a law of nature, as I said, but it's possible. So I want to round it off, talk about a couple of tangible things that we can do. First of all, yes, we need a why, a purpose. Simon Sinek has written a great book on that. Why in life? Why in your team? But you have to boil that down to 2 or 3 values that you can wake you up at night and say, this is what we stand for. If you as a leader have to read your values to your team, then we have an issue. Something intrinsically motivated. This is what we stand for. But we need the other why. We need more questions. We have all the answers. We have all the knowledge. We need more questions. Dare to ask questions. Number 2, bye-bye blah blah land. There is so much bullshit in politics and business. Dare to speak up. The Greeks called it doxa, das Gerede from Heidegger. If you sit there in meetings and sessions, if I was to be in those UN meetings listening to the bullshit that is spoken about truth, I would have spoken up many times now. Be the one that speak truth to power. Dare to speak up. The will to truth is the foundation of a society of collaboration and interdependency. When that is lost, we are lost. That's why we should take out all the bullshit and say, bye-bye, blah, blah land. What do you talk about when you use the words? What do you mean? Coming back to artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence can be fantastic if we agree on what we understand by a cognitive system, and we talk about what we want to do with it. Technology is not good or bad. It can be both. We have to decide what we should not do and what we want to do with it. And that requires a deeper understanding of whatever we mean when we talk about the digital transformation. We're not transforming into something. I remember Transformers as robots in disguise, Optimus Prime in my youth, where I saw the robot turn into a car and back to a robot. That's Transformers. We are at the beginning of a digital tsunami, and we're only starting to see the potentialities of quantum technologies and blockchain. There is so many new businesses to be created, so much value to be done there. So get out the blah, blah, and start to speak up. Number 3, how do we cope with change? I always say that we can do all this training on being aware and all the meditation, but just write on your fridge at home the word interested. Interested. Every day you go past the fridge and you see interested. It helps you to remember to listen, to be there in the moment a couple of times a day. And something magical will happen, because if you are interested, you will become interesting. We love interesting people. Interesting people get all the updates, all the news, all the technology, because they are interested. Interesting organization gets all the talent because they are interested in human beings. That's it. Be interested in the mensch, in the human being, and you will become interesting. Interesting equals interested. And the last one is that our feelings and our gut feelings about not understanding someone, we should also dare to speak up. Be vulnerable. Vulnerability is the birthplace of creation and innovation. Vulnerability is the birthplace of trust and relationship. We should talk about our feelings. That's what makes us stronger. When we see the pain, we know what we strive for. We strive for what makes us human beings. Experiencing our sensations, the consciousness, the awareness of our own awareness. And if there is one thing that is to be learned from this time, it is a crisis of existentialism. What does it mean to be a human being? What is it worth fighting for? We are asking ourselves, whether we're in Ukraine or in Norway or in Africa or whatever we are, today, the notion of what it means to be a mensch is becoming more present. Because with the technology, the art of being right and the optimization emerges the essence of what we feel. And I think, and I strongly do believe, that in those empty spaces between human beings, that what does not exist, the void, that what we cannot see, that is where we will find magic. And that means tapping into what it means to be a mensch, a human being. And for that, what we see in crisis, what we see in the darkest pain, the darkest moments, emerges love and truth. And do we dare to talk about love in business? Slavoj Žižek, the Slovenian philosopher, says the most beautiful question that a woman can ask her husband is, honey, why do you love me? For any women here today, try that tonight. Ask your spouse, your husband, why do you love me? If he answers, I love your breast or your character or your butt, then he does not love you. Guys, you can write down the answer now. We don't have to understand it. We just have to answer it correctly, right? If the husband answers, honey, what a strange question. I just love you. Then he loves that what does not exist. And that is the beauty. Do we dare to talk about love and the positive progress? Can we make an agreement here today that we now build a strategy of trust to fight this common enemy, but within our relationship, we start with trust. We have a society of distrust. We have to have transparency and validation to technology. You have to earn my trust. That will never work. Love, what is love? Love is a promise into the future. Love is that what I do not know. It's abundance of information. It's a trust into a relationship of a better future. And with that trust comes downfalls, setbacks, struggles, but just that helps us grow and learn and make progress. It is what makes life livable. It is what gives life a living aspect. And that can only become when we stop searching for something solid, something tangible, like happiness or a purpose in life. Life can be a wonderful journey to nowhere, but we have to take on that journey and believe in that light, in that positive progress. And that comes from our common strategy today, that we believe in a trust in a better future. Because the biggest risk that I see is that we do not put all our efforts in making better problems. I remind the Western politicians every single day, just because the headlines are not crashing, the situation is still terrible. We have to do more. We have to stay at it. The activation is the biggest challenge, but also the biggest opportunity for humanity. If we come together and practice the art of being right, optimizing and investing in technology, but also take on the art of being wrong. The actual experience of learning, the foundation of progress. Because as I said, life can be a wonderful journey to nowhere. There is no purpose to be found, but we can put purpose into this life. We do have at least the capability to influence our own perceived reality. So my message to you this evening, and my pledge and hope that we together can reinforce and reignite, and I'm happy to support however I can, is a very simple one. We have access now to the networks and the technologies. We can try some stuff. And we have this one life. And we live this life from a Western perspective until we suddenly realize that there is a second life. And the second life is when we do understand that the only thing finite is life itself. And then we take on the change, the acting, the doing. So it's all about one thing, one life, 2 words, do something. Let's bundle up and get on and reignite Ukraine. Slava Ukraine, thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you, Anders. You put the bar too high. Okay, I'm trying. But when people do something, they typically use some tools. When we using the word future, meaning the verb. When the future, we also need certain tools, certain instruments, and business, I believe, is one of the instruments. On your website, you are called a business philosopher. And coming back to this business or philosophy of business, there's still a lot of discussion, a lot of, let's say, disagreements about this. What business is driven naturally on the basis? Is it still driven by coming back to 17th century and the idea, in particular by Adam Smith, by the greed, by selfish, or it's driven by, let's say, deep moral responsibility to bring values to, as business people typically say, to our customers and to society? What's your opinion? Because it's still in discussion, it's still on the table, it's still not resolved.
No. Slava, that's a great question. And to be honest, it will not be solved. If Diogenes was around searching for an honest man with his lamp, he would still be searching. The foundation of what we do in with business is that it's not something that we will reach in terms of, the structures, honesty, but we can do better, I believe. Going back to Adam Smith, your question, he wrote about an invisible hand of the market, right? And he used that 3 times in his book, and he always used it differently. So I've been struggling with economists to say what he didn't even know himself what he meant, because it's not something solid. What I took out of it was there was a triangle of a strong nation state. It was religion and it was capitalism, right? So they balance each other out. But what kind of role do religion play in business today? And to be honest, do we have national economies today? When you look at organizations such as Apple, that is the 6th largest, national economy in the world, if you measure that. Out of the top 100, I think 60 or 70 are corporations that are interdependent on a global scale. So the playing field has changed. And at the same time, we have been trying to optimize and figure out something to models that is not compatible with the situation that we are in. When I wrote the quantum economy, I tried to outline an outlook of the next 10 years. I did certainly not see a pandemic coming, but it just sped up the forces. So if you think about things at the foundation, not in silos and entities, but as a whole picture, and take our, intellect and spend time on an intellectual deep dive, we can adapt all models to fit the current structures of the world. One example would be if Karl Marx was around and he would see that the exploiter and the exploited has in many regions of the world become one. There is no working class in that context in the Western economy. It's all about people typing in information that they consume. So we are exploiting our own capitalistic drive with what we produce. That's a new notion. It's a new state to be in. And for that, we need to adapt. So I totally agree with you that we need models. That's how our brain works. We need things to relate to. That's how our brain operates. When we drive a car, we only see the deviation to the saved data that we have. So we need that. But at the same time, we need to question those models at their very foundation, because it's not something solid. It's not something absolute. It's something dynamic. So it's our job to navigate, to adapt, to change, and to come back and try to be specific to your answer. I think we can hold against the current world economy an educational model where we teach young people a foundation of values to live by, that we take philosophy as a thinking practice where we come together, collaboration, co-creation, and talk more about the essence of learning than about trying to become experts of a particular field. If you say that you are an expert, you are solid on your ground. You stand for fixed information. You're not an expert. You're a professional amateur. That's what you are. You're hard-working professional, but you're an amateur because you carry a a shosin, a beginner's mind. You want to learn. And I think that is the solution to ethical issues, adapting models, and everything we have is education, having business school that where people today learn how to learn. And I think philosophy can bring a lot of help there to combine the understanding of the business world by questioning methodology. So I think the way out is not a quick fix, but it's about teaching people the foundation of learning itself, and then coming together to tackle these complex things and sit down and spend time on it. It's hard. It's challenging, but it helps us progress. And I think the foundation is education.
We'll come back to education a little bit later. But before, you mentioned this invisible hand of Adam Smith and quantum economy. In quantum physics, there's this entanglement idea, which, by the way, Albert Einstein called insane. The well-known phrase of Albert Einstein is that, it is insane to do the same and expect different result. And everybody knows about it, but not everybody knows that it is about quantum physics, where the things like this happening. Doesn't it mean that invisible hand of the market is substituted in quantum economy by this, unimaginable phenomenon when everything is linked together, but nobody knows why and how?
No, I wouldn't say that it's complete uncertainty. We can certainly measure things. We can measure the behavior of people. It's a bit difficult to predict the behavior of one human being, because we are unpredictable, but as a group, we can do things, right? And the quantum economy is not so much about finding relations to quantum physics as such. It's a part where you combine mind and matter. Even Werner Heisenberg, who came up with the ground structures of the uncertainty principle, he wrote his book on Helgoland, just outside Germany, and he was a big reader of Buddhism, Sunyata Buddhism. So even Erwin Schrödinger, with the Schrödinger equation, he wrote a book about mind and matter that tackles this dance at the outskirts of what we do know and what we don't know. So modern physics, or quantum physics, is an incomplete model because it has a problem. It's not compatible with the general relativity of Einstein. So they doesn't work together. It has a measurement problem, as you said, with the observer, and there are different interpretation. One that is taught a lot, Copenhagen interpretation, multi-worlds. There are many ways to look at quantum mechanics or quantum theory, but it's an incomplete model where we don't know everything. But that doesn't avoid the possibility to build a lot of things. Everything in technology, a lot of things in technology build on quantum principles, like lasers and what have you not. So it's there to work with. The mathematics is working, but it's not absolute. So for my worldview, is the quantum economy is not about balance. It's not about absolute, one or the other, but it's a strive towards dynamic equilibrium. So regardless of where you are, where the situation changes, it is all about, again, striving to progress, striving towards. It's a dynamic, and that's the infinite. In Germany, we talk about Enkelfähig. It's a word that means serving the children generation. It becomes very clear to all these family organizations and the Mittelstand and the hidden champions, because they always think like that. They have to have a good business today and for the future generation. So this dynamic is the essence of the quantum economy. And it's not like to be put back to the mathematics of quantum physics, but it's a tension on how to think differently about everything we think is solid and absolute, and think more in terms of potentialities and potential and probabilities. Probably it will be like that, but we also have to counter for other scenarios. So that's the essence of thinking away from a solid model that was never solid, and opening up to a dynamic, a fluid, if you like, way of thinking about life, world, and of course the economy, as we talked about today.
Thank you. Last question about the economy. I do like very much your idea about infinite versus big. And as a person with mathematical background, I do appreciate this differentiation between infinity and something really, let's say, big with dimension. And you mentioned sustainability, and David Attenborough, the quite known BBC, I don't know how to call it, Sir Attenborough, and others. Those who didn't see his film about nature probably missed a lot in their lives. So he once said that the person who believes in infinite growth of economy is either insane or economist, which means that we need to do something with this infinite growth. From the other side, the economy without growth, it's something which is very difficult to imagine and to mention, because the whole political infrastructure built on the economy assumes the growth or troubles. Your idea, could it be somehow clarified or implemented? Do you mean this? You mentioned technology moving into this virtual worlds. We are moving to economy of the matrix type society. I exaggerate, of course, but try to, let's say, to sharpen the question somehow. Or there are some other ideas how to become infinite and grow without eating the planet.
Yeah. So first, let's start with the virtual world, right? I'm writing a big piece now with a quantum physicist about why we do not live in a simulation, and we try to use mathematics and have unlimited power of computing power to prove that. And that's not possible, of course. So maybe we are in a simulation, and there are hypotheses for that. Elon Musk believes so, Nick Bostrom, the simulation hypothesis, because if eventually we will move into this world, it's probably already happened, right? But that's not the essence. I don't want to be in the matrix. I don't want to be in the metaverses. I like the normal verse. I like, even I would like to be with you in person. I like human beings. I can say very little about you. You might be an avatar. You might not be conscious. But what no one can take away from me is that it feels to me that I'm talking into a computer. I have my own subjective experience of what it feels like to be Anders speaking to you. So there is some realness in that, and I think that's pretty cool. So I'm not so pro all this virtualization, but it will not stop us from doing so. So it will be a big part of the economy. Coming to the second part of the question, referring to Sir David Attenborough and his thoughts about infinite growth. So to me, it's not so much about the infinity as such. The problem that we have gone after is maximization. So we try to maximize growth. We try to maximize for shareholders, and we don't use the resources in that notion. So do I think we have a problem with energy? No, I don't, because the sun gives us 10,000 times the energy that is required to run this planet and do everything for every poor region of the world. So it's only about technology. How do we save and distribute the energy? So of course, when you have lazy Norwegians and Germans that rely on some gas from a country that we don't want to talk about, and don't invest in the new technology, that's the stupidity of humanity. But as such, that's an infinite concept of energy that is in outer space and in black holes. And we have infinite energy potential, theoretically speaking. So then it becomes a technology issue. When it comes to food supply and all of that, we do have enough resources to feed all people on the planet, but we have a technology and redistribution problem. It's not equally shared, and it's not good how we have done it in the past. And all the things that we have done with animals and all that has come from the notion of maximization. When you talk about infinity, it is not that it's given, but it's talking about infinity makes for more of an optimization in an infinite term, because we want to live or have the extended human life infinitely. but we know, or at least we believe, that life is finite. So infinity is just a notion of how we should operate. We should take as if the planet could exist infinitely and try to work towards that. What does that mean? That means that we probably have to figure out how to cope with the climate that will change very, very rapidly. So do we think we can just limit ourselves and stop consuming and believe it will work? I don't think so. So I think we have to invest more in technology, more in believe in quantum and every potential that we can find to tackle these challenges. And I think we can do that. In 20, 30 years from now, we will look very differently to the whole debate on climate. Yes, there will be regions of the world that will suffer. It will not be the Netherlands, even though they're underwater, because they have a modern economy. They can build walls, they can restructure in technology. It will be Bangladesh or poor countries. They will always suffer, and that's the bad thing. We know that today. So the challenge today becomes, infinitely speaking, to think about how can we build this notion, this narrative, to serve Africa or Asian countries or poorer regions of the world. And we don't do that. It's not that we couldn't, I believe, it's just that we don't do it. And why is it? Because it's not lucrative, it's not easy, it doesn't have an economical potential to it. So this is the biggest challenge. So I agree with David Attenborough on some of the natural resources that we have limitations, but the actual problem that I believe is that where we are creating the technology today, we are not doing enough to take advantage of that and to serve humanity. We have an ethical problem. We have a problem of feeling the challenges of other people. The only way people act in the Western world is if they have water in their own basement. And that's sad. And I think that, coming back to we talked about before, had to do with education. How are you empathic? Have you taught? Do you visit these regions and feel the pain? Then maybe you act. But at the bottom, it lies all about understanding. When I today understand how the world will be most likely in 20, 30 years, I can take my money and invest in technologies that can help us solve or make these problems better. And that's much more, I believe, a positive look into the future than the notion of Sir David Attenborough relating the limitations of growth to everything, because I think progress is all we have. But it shouldn't be about maximization. It shouldn't be a maximize shareholder value. It should be about optimizing for all stakeholders and from there on growing. That would be my approach to it.
Got it. About the education, it's an important subject, and I'd like to at least to touch it. One of our participants in this webinar asked about how to incentivize, how to awaken in people, let's say, interest in learning. Or in your words, if I may formulate, how to motivate people to be interested before, let's say, monetize being interesting.
Yes.
So could you, again, about tools and how, because the education system is huge, it's very conservative, it is big, it is criticized from a lot of sides, but what to start with, how to do it? Even on a personal, on a family level.
Yeah. First of all, I mean, talking about the systems, it's very difficult for me because I know very little of the educational system in Ukraine. And I think Eric Kadiaro had asked what my vision for reigniting Ukraine. It's a different topic, but it boils back to my understanding of the current situation. I'm not knowledgeable to speak about how the educational system is. I can talk about like what I've seen in Afghanistan, to take the conflict there for the past 20 years. I saw a very different situation where the West came in and they did not invest in children education over a period of 20 years. So the Taliban regime came, there was still 50-60% of the children did not go to school. And of course, that will keep the same dogmatic worldviews, the same shit in, shit out, and it will not help us prosper. So I think that providing education, be it digital or like on a grassroots, is one of the core things to reignite Ukraine in terms of sparking that potential. And how do you do that? I have a personal story. I visited a school of philosophy, which is within the German normal school system. A children's school, they were aged 10 to 12 years old, and they learn how to philosophize. They don't learn about like Hegel and books, thick books, and you know, methodologies in philosophy. It's not academic philosophy, it's practical philosophy. So what they do is, what an example was, they were sitting in I was in this class, and they were sitting in a circle, and they grouped up with 1 or 2 people, and they used Lego pieces to build a word, a complex word in German, where they were explaining trustworthiness. It's different in Germany, so it makes more sense with the word, but it was about trustworthiness. And how can you build that with a Lego piece or a couple of Lego pieces? So it helps the mind think about a complex description to build something physical and then explain it to someone what you were thinking. So instead of saving data and learning information, just sucking in, you know, textbooks and doing tests, you get a practical approach to think about a problem. And I think that is something that you can start at a very early age, because we have to remember, when we come to this planet, we have an empty storage, right? We navigate. Remember my daughter a couple of months ago, she's 6, is going to start school now. So she was walking past an escalator and she saw a red button, and she went over, and the first thing that came to her mind, what does this red button do? So we have that curiosity and the creativity and the eager to learn, and then we go to school apparently, and we stop doing so because you learn the same, you know, speed, we learn the same things, we learn the same books. So the way we do education, how to offer digital tools and lively experiences, sparks of interest, different types of views, different subjects, helps us think about the world in a different way. I think art, music, you have a very strong culture of art and music. I've experienced some classical musicians from Ukraine at various events and here in Europe, and I was in Barcelona and so on. So I do understand. I think mixing that with, you know, standard educational models is a very good way to spark a new way of learning. If you can combine philosophy and art with business education to a broader extent, if children can focus on, you know, practical philosophy, get into art and music, because they have the technology at hands, so they learn the technology. The question is, how can we play with it? How can we get an understanding? So these type of things, I think that would also answer your question, Eric, is to go and be a pioneer on new educational models for building a better world, avoiding the issues that we have run into in the past, and being like a showroom on how you can do education on a digital scale, but also in a local, like in a closed, you know, educational school system type of thing. That could be a project that could be exported into every region of the world, which again will represent how businesses will be in the future in Ukraine, because you will educate new business leaders. So you have a high interest from other people around the world, how the culture of Ukraine with the art and the music combined with philosophy is taken to the classical education, mixing it up. That could be something exciting, could be a food for thought and idea. But I think that is the essence, is that how we educate, how we inspire young people, the next generation. That is one of the things that we start with today, to stop having that shit in, shit out. And that could be at the business school, but also a way to reignite Ukraine.
Well, I have a big amount of questions still. Well, I'd like to ask one more, and probably we have a time shortage, but still.
I have time, so just keep on. I mean, we are all in an...
You mentioned several times your daughter. What Anders Indset is other than philosopher? What is your life? How can you unite this all together in your private life? What could you share a few words? Yes. About your family, your daughter?
Happy to do so. Yes, I used to be a hardcore capitalist. And everything that I did was based on what other people think about me, how much money I had. Everything was absolute. It was everything in an external worldview. And I was always reading philosophy, and I wanted to learn the German language so I could read the thick German books and try to get into that deep philosophy. And I didn't know what to do about it. But what I didn't do in my hardcore capitalistic life, I made a lot of money, I lost a lot of money, I was an entrepreneur, I did everything, but I didn't feel success. I didn't experience my own experience of what it felt to me to be successful. So I got very tired and worn out. So I sold my company and I started to say, okay, what do you do now? You understand the world of business, and you're passionate about philosophical contemplation. Now you combine the two, because there is a need in the business world for people to come in and ask the right question and think about ethics and with technology. So I saw that coming, but I didn't want to be a consultant. I wanted to think about it myself. So I just pulled out and I started to write, and I started to read a lot. And that's when I found the experience of learning, where I have taught about some problems and some issues, and I found ways of thinking by reading about people from the past. So how I look at books today is, it's not trying to understand what exactly they meant, but how that can be applied in a different context today. Because all of us in this round, we are thinkers of our time. And when we think about something and find answers within other ways of thinking or history, then it gives us a pleasure of success. And that for me was the privilege that I can now get up at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock every single day, have my own hour, my thinking hour before my kids get up, and just sit there and be privileged, because I am very privileged and I'm very thankful for that. And I can just learn, and the learning gives me the pleasure. And then, of course, as to me, philosophy is a thinking practice. I invest in projects, I initiate projects because I want to see my thoughts come to life. And that's, to me, is my day. I'm very opportunistic in terms of the things that I'm interested about. So it's a very egocentric journey. When I'm curious about something, I want to learn it. But I'm also try, of course, to spend a lot of time with my daughters and with my family. So it's never, it is obviously when you travel a lot, and then now loosening up after COVID, I'm speaking all around the world. It's a logistic. So I always also have structure. I have a very good team, but I try to free myself and spend as much time doing nothing, having no schedule, as I do having something or doing sport for that matter. So one thing that I always give leaders is to have, we all do the physical scum, as Stephen Hawking called it, right? We optimize our body, we do the weight room, the yoga pants and everything, but we don't do any bench pressing for the mind. Just sit there and do nothing. Schedule a time where you only have a piece of paper and a pen, and you just stare into that paper, and something pops out, because you cannot shut the mind down, but you can train it. And I think that is an essence that has gone lost by leaders and business leaders. They just do meetings from Zoom to zombie. They just do react to crisis. We have to take those 1, 2, 3, 4 sessions a week where we just sit down and reflect. And I do that. And then I find a lot of time for my family, of course, outside of that structured part of living. So, of course, as everyone else, it's a struggle, it's a challenge, but it's much more pleasant if you experience your day, you experience the setbacks, you experience the struggles, and you experience the learning. And that's something wonderful that gives a lot of energy to do a lot of stuff.
Great. Every Wednesday, last weeks, I feel very happy at 6 p.m. Starting this event of ReinforceUA and feel pity at 7 p.m. For having to close the interesting discussion. And thank you very much, Anders, for today's very inspiring discussion and very inspiring thoughts. We need to sort it over, and I'm sure that many people would come back to the records and think of what you've said and probably try to future, which is very important in our times. And for everybody else, thank you very much for joining us today. And I'd like to remind you that ReinforceUA project we will continue, and our next meeting is scheduled for the 7th of September, again from 6 p.m. Kyiv time, and we shall be meeting Dr. Sanyan Sian. She is also entrepreneur and leads Duke University Coach Leadership and Ethics Center at the Fuqua School of Business, and is a professor at Duke Pratt School of Engineering. And she has more than 1 million followers on LinkedIn, and obviously she had a lot of good ideas to share with us next Wednesday. I'd like to remind you all also that you can make donations for temporarily moved women who want to start their own business on our website, and we are looking forward to meeting you back next Wednesday. Anders, thank you very much, and please say it again, Slava Ukraini, and we will finish with this.
Slava Ukraini.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
The war in Ukraine has changed the world, and now we need to think about where this world is moving to, together. That's why MIM Business School is launching the nationwide educational project ReinforceUA, where the world's greatest minds will share their ideas and insights. And you will get their experience, change your perspective, and discover what changes should the business be ready for, before and after the victory. Every week on ReinforceUA.com.